In this second tutorial, we will simplify expressions by combining like terms. So here we are looking at simplifying and combining like terms. Here is a term. There are three specific parts to our term. There is a coefficient, that's the number that's being multiplied to our term, and then there's a variable part. The variable part has two parts. It has a variable, we can also call that the base, and the variable has an exponent. That's that tiny little number up here. It's a 2 in this case. We need to know all three parts by these vocabulary words: coefficient, variable, and exponent. So let's practice identifying those three things. I have four terms in this table. Let's first identify the coefficients. The coefficients are the numbers that are being multiplied. So this first coefficient is 8. In our second term, that coefficient is now a 9. We don't see the number that's right here, but when you don't see that number that's being multiplied, it must be a 1. And our final coefficient, of course, is 12. So we can identify the coefficients pretty simply. The variables are our letters. The letter in this first term is a C. The letter in the second term is an X. The letter or variable in the third term is a Y. And there are two variables in my last term, an A and a B. So I will list them both. And finally, let's look for the little exponents. Remember, those are the numbers that are on top of the variables. I see that little 2 right here, so that's my exponent in this term. I don't see the exponent in this term, but when you don't see it, because we see an x, there must be at least a 1 right there, so the exponent is 1. The exponent now is an 8 in this third term, and because there were two variables, there are two exponents, a 2 and a 3. So now that you can identify all of the parts, let's combine like terms. Like terms are terms that have identical variable parts, which means they have to have the same variables, the same letters, and those letters have to have the same exponents. When you do have that, we can simplify using addition and subtraction by keeping the identical variable parts the same and simply adding or subtracting the coefficients. Let me show you through three examples. Let's look at example 4. I have 3x plus 4x. Well, my identical variable parts are just simply these x's, and they are identical. And since those are identical, I can take their coefficients, 3 and 4, and add them together. I'm going to come off and do that over here. 3 plus 4, of course, is 7. So 3x plus 4x will be 7x. The variable part stays the same, and the coefficients combine together using our math. Let's look at example 5. Oh wow, I have five terms. Are all of them identical variable parts? Well, let's start with the first one. 6x, well, that has an x in it. The next term does not. The next term does not. The fourth term, that also has an x. But the fifth term does not. So these two terms have identical variable parts, and I can combine them. I'm going to take the 6 coefficient and the -7, watch out because the signs go with the coefficient. I'm going to come off to the side, and I'm going to say 6 minus 7 is -1. So these two terms combine to make -1x. I'm finished with those terms. Let's move on to the next terms. I see a 4, that's just a regular number. I see a 15, that's just a regular number. So this 4 and this 15 combine together to make 19. That's a positive 19, so I need my plus sign. And finally, my last term, it's a 10y. But there are no other terms that have a y there, so there's nothing else to change this term. It's a positive 10y here, so it's going to be a positive 10y in my final answer. Now you can circle this, that's fine, but we don't usually show the ones as coefficients. So I'm just going to rewrite this to a negative x and then keep the positive 19 and the positive 10y. I like that answer better. Let's look at our final example. I have 13xy, and this is not an xy because these have different exponents. Remember, they have to be identical variable parts. So these two terms are not like terms. But this xy and this xy make these two terms like terms. And if they're like terms, I can combine their coefficients. I see a 13 and I see a negative 9. 13 minus 9 is 4. And then I just keep the xy the same. Are the other two terms like terms? Do they have the same variables to the same exponents? Yes, they do. X to the third with x to the third. Y squared, y squared. These are like terms as well. So I can combine those two terms by adding their coefficients. I have a positive 12 and a negative 5. 12 minus 5 is 7. Since it's positive 7, I need that plus sign. And then just keep the same variables and the same exponents. And I have my final answer. Thanks for watching this tutorial, and we will see you in class to combine like terms. See ya.